G'day guys, how's it bloody going? And welcome to M825 Reviews Lone Survivor. Lone Survivor is a survival war movie based on the true story of a Navy SEALs mission, Operation Red Wings. So the basis of the operation and the plot of the movie is the Navy SEAls are trying to track down and kill a notorious Taliban leader in Afghanistan. So the movie focuses on these 4 Navy SEALs that were sent in to carry out a surveillance operation of this village where the Taliban leader is, and they're supposed to just sit there in the mountains and just lie in wait until the next day. But the mission gets blown to shit and they end up getting found out by these goat herders, and a moral decision pretty much ends up with them being hunted in the mountains by the Taliban. So the whole movie is pretty much just a survival story of these 4 guys trying to survive the Taliban and try and find a way home. So I pretty much can't go on anymore about the plot because the main plot is just these guys trying to survive, and that's what the whole movie's about. You might think this movie sounds, simplistic and boring, but trust me, there are plenty of pros for this movie, so let's move on to the pros and cons. Starting with the pros. This movie has some extremely tense and nail-biting scenes. This movie is absolutely brutal, but not in the kind of glorifying action movie kind of way, but just in the realistic feel of the pain that these guys are going through. I don't watch a lot of war movies, so I can't really compare it to anything I've seen before, but it's just really well done, and you feel their pain. The one thing I really like about this movie is that it doesn't use a lot of music for the scenes. There's a lot of physical sounds in this movie, like walking and breathing and just the wildlife of the mountains. It just really adds an atmosphere, and it feels really tense. You feel like what these guys would have felt like when they were doing this mission. I was just constantly sitting there, something gonna happen. I was kind of terrified. In these downtime scenes where nothing even happens, it just feels really tense just because of that. I think this movie gets major pros for the sound editing and the soundtrack. Now, I haven't listened to a lot of Explosions in the Sky, but I know that they're an instrumental band, and I'm not sure which songs they did for this movie, but the music in this movie was just beautiful, and it just really set the tone and, the feeling. It was just really top-notch soundtrack for this kind of movie, and the sound editing, it just made you feel like you were there, and you could feel the Navy SEALs' pain as, they're taking every single breath, and you can hear it. It's just great, it's realistic, and I just love that about this movie. Oh, and speaking of brutality, best falling down mountains I've ever seen in a movie. Now, I've seen people fall down things before, but usually it's either comical or it doesn't look as painful, but in this movie, it looks like someone could have died doing this. Face smashing against rocks, bodies flinging into trees. It looks so brutal, and you just feel every crack. It's the sound editing again. It's just every crack and crunch, and oh my god, it looks so painful. I constantly just kept feeling sorry for these guys. These have got to be the toughest soldiers I've ever seen in a movie, and if something like this similar happened in real life, God, these must be the toughest guys in the world. I mean, at the start of the movie, they'd show some clips of them actually training soldiers in endurance, letting them lie down in freezing cold water and stuff like that. It's very interesting, and it goes to show they can take pain. Believe me, they don't just go down with one shot in this movie. Also, another thing that caused a lot of tension in this movie was the language barrier. You know what I'm talking about, when there's a serious situation going on, everybody's yelling at each other, but in different languages, and you just don't understand what they're saying, and you're just sort of freaking out because you're like, what are they talking about? Are they gonna kill me? Something like that. It's just really tense. I felt that there was a believable bond between these 4 characters. The actors played them well, and they felt like they were best friends. I loved the smart-ass comments that they did between each other, and I believed that they cared for each other. I don't know if I've ever really seen Mark Wahlberg in a movie like this, but he does really well. I think I've only seen him in a comedy. I think he's been in other action movies, but he did really well in this movie. Like I said, I don't watch a lot of war movies, but I took my girlfriend to go and see this, and she doesn't like war movies pretty much at all, but she enjoyed it as well. I think it helps that this movie is more of a survival movie than a war movie. It's just about these 4 guys just trying to survive. And it's really sad, and it's really badass and awesome and just horrifying and tense. It's all of these things mixed into one, and it's just, great package in a movie like this. Great soundtrack and great scenes and great action and great this. It's just, everything in this movie just felt really great to me. But in saying that, there are a few cons, so let's move on to the cons. Now, going into this, I didn't know anything about Operation Red Wings. I didn't know, like, who lived or anything. And unfortunately, like, at the start of the movie, it just shows who lives. So there was no real shock when you saw certain people die, because you knew they were going to die, because you know who lives. Like, I understand that some people, like, know the real story and they know who lived, but I didn't, and I would have liked that mystery. And also, at the start of the movie, I felt maybe there was not enough character development. Like, there were scenes at the start of them, like, setting up the operation, and scenes of them, chatting back and forth, but there wasn't, like, a real lot of, chemistry. I felt that the chemistry sort of came when they were in the field, but before then it didn't feel like the same sort of chemistry. It was a lot better when they got out into the field, but when they were back at the base, it seemed sort of, nothing. Just didn't feel like that bond that, like, happened, like, later in the film. It was just really strange, and I would have liked a bit more character development. I know it's, like, a long movie. It was about 2 hours long, but still, I would have liked to have known a bit more about these guys and see them bond a bit more. Oh, and speaking of operations, I had no freaking idea what the hell they were talking about. You'd have to really know your army stuff to understand what the hell they were talking about during these first early scenes. I was just sitting there watching, freaking, yeah, you do that, yeah. Like, I play a lot of army games and stuff like that, so I hear things every now and then, but I did not get a thing that they said about this operation, so I had no idea I really kind of had no idea what the point of the operation was, really. Like, I couldn't tell what the details were, like, really. So I didn't know, like, what they were trying to do when the mission, like, blew up. But yeah, it's just, I couldn't follow it. You might be able to follow it if you know your army stuff, but I had trouble following it. I might just have to watch it again so I just understand better, but yeah. So yeah, overall, I think the beginning of the movie sort of, drags on a bit. Like, even though it's not a very long scene, the start of the movie, but it drags on and doesn't really give me that character development that I would have liked. And just stuff like that, and it doesn't really rev up until they get out into the field, and that's when all the tense things start happening. And then the Taliban attack, and, that's when shit really hits the fan. And that's when the best scenes, like, come out for this movie, and the best bonding moments for the characters. It's a really great movie after the start. So yeah, stick with it with the start. The start might seem boring, but when it gets, into the action and the survival instinct kicks in, it's bloody awesome. I really like this movie. I liked it better than I thought I would. It's realistic, it's brutal, and just, I felt sorry for these guys generally. But yes, it is a little bit of a tricky one to recommend, because I wouldn't recommend it as a war movie because it feels more of a survival movie, but I recommend this if you do like survival movies. Because if you hate war movies but you like survival movies, I think you'll still like this one. But if you go into it thinking of a war movie, I'm not too sure if you will enjoy it. It depends. It had good elements of both war and survival, but more of survival, but I still enjoyed the war part too. I don't really know how to not recommend this movie. I guess I wouldn't recommend it if, you didn't like survival/war movies with brutal, realistic tone and just stuff like that, but I thought it was a really good movie, and if you do like movies like that, you should go and definitely see it. I would definitely watch this again. I can't wait for it to come out. I want to buy it. I don't think I'll be watching a war movie at any time soon, but this one was just fucking awesome. So have you seen Lone Survivor? Did you think it was tense and brutal and realistic, and did you think it was more of a survival film than it was a war film? And of course, if there's anything you want to know about the movie that I didn't talk about, leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you. And if you like this review, remember to like me on Facebook or subscribe to me on YouTube if you want to see more. Alright guys, thanks for watching this review, and I can't wait to do the next one. MAT5 is bloody out of here.